Hey, how you going? It's Patrick from North Australian Heavy Mechanical. Once again, banging out another episode on the side of the road. I'm in Dampier again on a couple of days off in between jobs. I just want to say thanks very much to everyone for the support on the last couple of videos. It's been amazing. So I want you to do me a favour. I want you to smash that like button for me. It really helps getting the videos out there, and leave a comment, and do me a favour if you know an apprentice or a tradesman that's chasing some experience and wants to learn more, send this video to them. Do me a solid. It really helps, and you know, this is my way of giving back. A lot of people complain about the state of the industry and the experience levels. No one wants to share anything. Here it is on a silver platter for you. So once again, thanks very much. So today I'm going to add a bit of context to one of the reels that I did, and it was basically attachment failures. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go over attachment work and setup and prep. So basically, I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios of how you can set cylinders up, how you can bleed the system down and make sure that system is safe to work on. So the first up to take into consideration is this is like one of the things that nearly drives me mad every time you go to set a machine up, but is the boiler is working on the bucket. So you want to make sure you understand the workflow of what needs to be changed and what needs to be done in this outage, and get in contact with the boilers, because the amount of times I've had boilers turn up halfway through a shift and say, oh no, we need the bucket in this position. You know, it just comes down to communication, you know. So basically, as soon as you know what work there is to be done, you get in contact with the boilies and get them down there to make sure, number one, you're not going to be interacting with them, and then you can plan the work accordingly, right? So you sort of need to, you know, let them know how long the machine's going to be disabled for, because obviously they're going to need to move it at some stage. Anyway, so the next thing to take into consideration when completing attachment work is the number one thing is stored energy, right, and bleeding it down. So to start off with, accumulators for pilot or servo circuits, right? So the reason these machines have pilot accumulators, a couple different reasons. The first one being is for it acts like a battery, right? So it extends the size of the circuit. So the demand on the circuit at times, the little pumps that they have to create the servo oil cannot keep up with this with the demand at times. So by putting an accumulator in that circuit, you're extending the capacity. It works exactly like a battery, right? It just makes it so smoother operation. That little pump can then keep up with the circuit. And then the second reason is for the emergency lower position. So on the lead bears, basically, you know, it's in your service checks, is you could put your boom up in the air, shut the machine down, turn your ignition off, turn the ignition back on, put your lock lever down, and then you lower that machine. So that's a form of stored energy, right? So basically when you do that, position your machine, turn it off, turn the key back on, operate your levers, and nice and slow, and this will bleed down that stored energy in the pilot accumulator. So on the O&Ks, a little bit of a different setup. They have a switch on the BCS tower. You shut the machine down, put it in the position that you want it in, flick that switch, and then you operate your levers and bleed that pressure down. This will bleed some of the pressure down in the attachment, but not always the case, right? So this is where backing our secondaries out comes into play, right? So when that spool is in the neutral position, for bucket example, the load side of the circuit is shut off to the return, so that we'll have stored energy. So what we do is we back these out, and all you've got to do, you don't touch this screw here, this one here, you unseat the secondary, and this unseats the O-ring here, and what you'll hear is a hiss. So you should crack it about a full turn out, and it should start to hiss, right? You can just keep backing it out. You'll hear the hiss, and that is how we used to, and you still do, it's still fairly common practice, is back the secondaries out, because you don't want to go cracking lines that have stored energy in it. I've done it many times where I've just gone, whatever, go and do it, and then you end up getting covered in oil, and that's how you do end up with oil injection, because believe it or not, these things, you know, 320 bar they can have in them is a massive amount of stored energy, right? Or even on the load side, you can have up to 380 bar. So backing secondaries out is essential. But these days now, they've come up with what's called a Jarvie valve. Now, not all machines have these Jarvie valves. So these Jarvie valves are basically a stack with all the hoses going off to the load side of each circuit. So one for bucket extend, one for stick extend, stick retracts, bucket retract, boom extend, boom retract, clam extend, clam retract if you've got a clam. And these basically have little taps on them so you can unscrew them and bleed the pressure down safely via those. They have a dump tap. I'll include a video of these so you can see and get an idea. These are not standardised across machines, but they are now becoming more and more common as they have, realising that this is a real hazard, stored energy. So it's a really quick, effective way and saves you backing the secondary out. We're all human, right? Every now and again, you back them out, leave them out, and then they go back to work like that, and then you've got a drifting implement. So that's the Jarvie valves, right? So now, once we've made our attachment, set up in the right position, we've got to know who's doing what. The best way to position our attachment, right? So I'll start off with bucket cylinders, and the best way to do a bucket cylinder is at 90 degrees. It's not always the case. I don't know if you can do it with Hitachis. I think, you can do it with Hitachis at 90. But the Liebherrs and the ONKs, they have bucket stops, so that cylinder contacts the bucket stop before that cylinder comes to the end of stroke, right? So keep in mind, if the bucket stops are worn or they're fitted a bucket and those bucket stops are not contacting, that bucket will have load on that pin because the cylinder will be at the end of stroke. So obviously when you fit a bucket, you should always make sure that it's contacting the bucket stops. We have soft stops, but soft stops don't always, in my experience, a very unreliable circuit, constant maintenance keeping those things running. So the actual hard metal stop is what is the best way to leave it. So when you position your bucket, I'll show you a photo of a machine at 90. Basically, you want to make sure it's contacting that bucket stop, and if it's not contacting that bucket stop, stop. Go and get a Boilermaker to go and make a spacer plate, tack it into position on the bucket and make sure. That is a way of making sure, and then you'll need to rectify those bucket stops. On the ONKs, obviously they rely heavily on those bucket stops because they don't have soft stops in the older ones. So they do get flogged out and they may not be contacting. So if you're getting a pin that's not moving, chances are you've got that cylinder's loaded up. So when it's in the 90 position on the rolled right round on the bucket, it should be contacting the bucket stops, and that cylinder won't be at the full extension, so you'll be able to move that pin. So if you can't move a pin, chances are you've got load on that cylinder, and that's where as well too, backing your secondaries and bleeding your system down will help, because if you have pressure in there, that pin will not move. Same thing with your stick cylinders. Best thing is mid-stroke, so at 90 degrees, always have your bucket rolled round on your bucket stops. And boom cylinders can be done in this position as well too. Never leave an attachment to do a cylinder where it can move. Things to take into consideration many a times. Line borers have been working away, and there's a few videos getting about that I've seen of attachments moving from people cracking lines off. I don't like when they set the machine up at 90 for a line borer. It's just, I don't think it's the safest way to do it. I always like to have that stick all the way out if you've got the bucket removed and the stick cylinder's on the end of stroke. So if it's at the end of stroke, it can't move any further, right? So, if you're doing a set of boom cylinders and that thing's set up at 90, chances are that thing can potentially move. So it's best off doing it in the fully stick extend position. Some things to keep in mind again with that. Obviously on the Liebherrs, they have what's called the soft stops. The cylinder will not extend all the way out because it will disengage those valve banks once the proxies have been reached. So we'll disengage and it won't get it all the way to go. So when you set a machine up, keep in mind you may have to disconnect the soft stops to get it all the way to the end of stroke. So, with boom cylinders, it's always taken into consideration. I recommend doing one at a time. If you've got it in that 90 position, obviously leaving one on it is always a safer option. But yeah, keep in mind with the boom cylinders, it can be messy work, and if you have interactions and you have boilies on the front of the bucket, sometimes the best position for it is with the teeth all the way out, and that just comes into planning and communication at the start of the job and understanding what cylinders you're doing and what is priority work. So basically that's a good start for you to understand how to set these up, stored energy, bleed them down, whether it's via the secondaries, the pilot, you know, you don't want to go cracking lines and getting covered or having the attachment move on you, which is, there's plenty of videos getting about of people cracking lines on attachments, and you know, you see them fall out of the sky. You definitely don't want to be that guy. So now I'll go over the challenges that the O&K shovels present. So basically, a couple of tips for those is when you're doing your boom cylinders, you have to have 2 slings that come down either side of what's called the stunger. You know, when you drop it down, it's not so much of a drama, but when you lift it up, this is what comes into attachment work, is taking the time to line things up correctly. So if you've got a sling on either side, when you lift that boom cylinder up, they tend to do this, and then the eye just ends up where it ends up. Putting an endless chain in there so you can adjust that cylinder once you get it up to the bore is a really good way of doing it. So you know, the challenges that shovels face is you know, when you're doing a boom on those, it is quite a complex job. I'll include some footage of a setup for doing a boom on an O&K shovel to give you an idea. It's complicated work, and it takes a lot of communication and planning between the teams. So I'm going to give you now a story of me removing a pin. I didn't at the start. I said no, I don't want to do it that way, and then eventually just said, yeah, all right, I'll do it if that's all we've got. So basically, it was pulling a large pin of a boom cylinder out with a come along and a IT that had a pallet on it, and I didn't like the idea of it. After, you know, some convincing, I got up and did it and positioned the basket so when that pin came out, if it did roll or move, it wouldn't roll into the basket. But one thing led to another. Overloaded the IT. The IT reels came off the arse end, and the IT operator panicked and lifted the boom of the IT up, and then it brought it up and nearly rolled that pin into the basket, dragging us to the ground. Right, quickly come along that pin to the pallet, and basically then started yelling at the guys on the ground to get a franner ASAP, right? So always when you're doing you know, this sort of work, highly recommend pin cages and things like that. Pin cages and come-alongs are the best bet. It just so, you know, you can push pins in with ITs and things like that, but it's just another unnecessary interaction, and taking your time and getting things lined up and getting things perfect and greased before they go in. I prefer to use a come along. You put 2 eyes on the housing and then put a lifting eye on the pin and pull the pin in with a come along, right? It's the safest way to do it. And if you can't pull it in like that, basically, you know, you're going to have to force it, and it's going to take some effort. You will get it with an IT, but you know, it just saves that interaction. You know, say for example, if you're doing a pin down a cylinder down a pit on a breakdown with limited personnel, which I have at times, you know, basically you don't have to get an IT to pull a pin in, especially on the O&Ks and the Liebherrs. You can just have 2 lifting eyes and pull that pin in, you know, with a come along. It's my opinion the safest way to do it. If you're getting another IT involved or a Manitou or whatever it might be to push that pin in, it's just another interaction, and you're just yelling from the basket down to the operator, and then you've got to line them up. It's just unnecessary interactions, right? That's where pin cages and come-alongs really come into their own, especially when you have limited personnel, right? So moving forward, I'll go over bleeding cylinders and using the buddy pumps or the porta power packs that are designed to extend these cylinders without the machine running. So often you have to install cylinders in maintenance processes where the machine is unrunnable, right? And this is where the extender, the cylinder extender or the power pack comes into its own, right? Basically you can extend that cylinder in and out on its own. And then this is also important for bleeding the cylinder up. So some cylinders will have bleed screws on them and you can bleed it up via that. But the best way to do it is just a couple of times, extend that cylinder in and out, you know, up to 10 times, just to try and get that air out of it. Because what this leads to, if you don't bleed it, you know, if you don't bleed a cylinder and then go full noise and start extending a cylinder and start using a cylinder, as it basically has a lot of air in it, and it causes this thing called dieseling, leading to premature failure of that cylinder, right? So you want to try and avoid this as much as possible. And this is where bleeding the cylinders is, yeah, you shouldn't be setting a machine to work without spending some time bleeding that, you know, and you can do that with the machine running. Just slowly lift the boom up a little bit, down, lift it up a bit higher, down, and do that 20 odd times, and you'll fair chance you've got the air out of it, or utilise the bleed screws. But don't undo the bleed screws, and just go full noise with the machine. It's gonna, you're gonna have a lot of pressure there. So always keep that in mind. Never ever work around stored energy or the potential for pressure to leak out. Oil injection is nasty. You want to try and avoid that as much as possible, and that's where setting the machine up, utilising Jarvie valves and secondaries comes into play, right? So, basically bleeding cylinders are super important, whether you do it with the machine or the power pack supplied. Always keep that in mind. That is a must for cylinders. And then we'll move on to greasing. So pre-purging cylinders, pre-purging pins and pre-filling cavities. On the O&Ks, they have a massive cavity, and it's super important to, number one, pre-fill these because it's a massive amount of grease, and it would take the machine weeks to pre-fill this cavity. So then we also purge it as well too. So once we've pre-filled that cavity, connect the cylinder up, pin it, put our pin caps on, we go through and purge that until there is grease just absolutely screaming out of it. And it's super important. Cannot stress this enough with the O&Ks. They're a massive cavity, and it will take ages. The machine will be filling that for weeks basically. So, and it's super important, even when you send these machines back to work, go down, allow it to work for an hour, especially if you've replaced a bucket and it's had line boring and that cavity's been emptied and then refilled. Go and temp shoot the pins when it goes back to work, and keep purging. Make sure you purge. I can't stress that enough, because there's been a couple of cases where I've heard of O&Ks going back to work and getting hot pins and basically destroying that freshly replaced bore. So some things to keep in mind when you are running the machines up. So if you've done an attachment change out, they're always in a hurry to get the machine out and back to work. In my experience, after changing multiple cylinders, valve banks, whatever it might be, and you've drained that attachment of oil, it takes a good 6 to 8 hours of running that machine to completely get the air out of that attachment. So keep in mind the oil level keeps going down. So I've seen machines many a time returned to work, and then the next thing you know, it goes to work for half an hour and it comes up with a low flow alarm for low oil. So basically I'll go back over a few things. Number one thing, communication between the teams and understanding of the work that you're carrying out, and how best to position the machine and how long the machine will be disabled for. And that means calling up the boilies and getting them down there. No excuse. Don't set that machine up until you have clear comms from them of how they're happy with the machine. Always take into consideration the interactions. If you're doing a boom cylinder and the bucket needs to be curled right round, ask the boilies if they can have it all the way out. Bleeding down stored energy via our pilot, O&Ks via the switch, and then the Lee Bears by shutting the machine down, turning the ignition back on, putting our S7, our lock lever down, and then bleeding that down. Just do it nice and slow, and back and secondaries out is a suitable way. Just remember to back them back in. Jarvie valves, a great way to do it. They're the new way. The best way to position an attachment for bucket cylinders is at 90. Stick cylinders as well too. If a pin's not moving, you may have load on that pin or pressure, stored energy on it. Always when removing pins, if you've got load on that pin, it's definitely going to either be a pressure in that cylinder, or you're going to have it's not contacting the bucket stops, or it's at end of stroke. So there's and purging. I can't stress that enough. Purge and bleed cylinders. Not bleeding cylinders is a massive cause of failure, and especially if a cylinder's going back to one of these reconditioning mobs, they're looking for any excuse to get out of giving warranty. So returning a machine to work, always run it, always cycle those cylinders nice and slow, and make sure grease as well too. Grease is super important. Make sure before you're sending a machine back to work, if you have to go and do a test on all the attachment, especially if you've done a brand new attachment, it's got all new injectors, make sure every point is removed, bagged, and confirm that every point is getting grease. So hopefully that gives you a good understanding of setting machines up for attachment work. You know, it's super high risk work. It involves at times lots of cranes, up to 2 to 3 cranes at a time. Come along is a great way to pull pins back in and just minimise those interactions on pads, and always take your time to line the pins up. Basically, I can't stress that enough as well too, because you know, what seems like, oh yeah, it's only 5 mil out, it'll go, it definitely won't go. So I've had to battle it out a few times. So once again, thanks very much. Like, share, comment, it helps massively to get the word out there. So I'd love to grow this thing and see where we can go with it. So some merch will be dropping soon. Have some hats and some shirts. So if you want to get on board, let me know. Yeah, leave me some comments if you have any questions. Cheers.